Welcome to this series where you are going to build a part of your portfolio. Not only will you learn how to model, texture and light certain objects, you will also learn how to make some environments. You're going to make this environment with a glittery gel on the bottom. We're going to make this beautiful product sitting in a very cool looking dark environment. We're then going to use that same product and make a liquid simulation. And finally, we're also going to make this glass product, which eventually we will bring into another environment where it's laying in some type of gel. You'll learn how to model, sculpt, texture, light, but also some other things such as liquid and cloud simulations. If you're only interested in one specific render, you can find the chapters in the description. So without further ado, let's get started. Today we are going to make this professional product image, and it's surprisingly simple. Now before we get started, I am using the lighting add-on Lumio in this video, but it is not required in order to achieve the same result. So let's do this. I'm going to guide you through it step by step. It's actually very easy. Let's delete all of this, Shift A, image, reference. Here it's just a screenshot from the website, so I do think it has some dark overlay over this, but we're simply going to take the general shape of this bottle, and that's the entire goal. So I'm going to shift this over to the side until the Y is going straight to the I, like this. And then I will bring in a mesh circle, and now we've got a circle, RX90, we've got it right over there. Let me turn on the screencast key for you real quick. Screencast keys, this should work. Yeah, we got it, cool. So we get a circle right here. Now I'm going to scale this down and it should be proportional enough that it's reaching both sides at the same time. Now this is not entirely the case, but we're just going to work with it. So G and Y, let's select all of this. So tab, go into edit mode, click on vertices, E and Y, let's bring this up all the way over here. And now it's sloping inwards just a little bit, so E and Y. The reason why I'm pressing Y is because it's laying down on the grid like X and Y, so I didn't place everything RX90 like this. I'm simply working from the top, and that might be considered a bit more tedious, but I don't mind. So I'm going to scale this down just a little bit, then I'm going to press E and Y, scale this until we reach that part right over here where it's sloping inwards, and E and Y, let's bring it all the way over here until it's ending in there. I'm going to add an extra loop cut, Control R, scale this, and then I will select this, E and Y. Let's bring it upwards to what I think is reasonable for within this bottle. So I think something like this. Now we're not going to make the circle in here because we're not going to actually animate it. We are simply going to use this for a product image, but feel free to do whatever you like. So I'm just going to press F here. It's not an important part because it will be covered by this cap. And right here, let's go over to this side, E and Y. Let's scale this just a little bit, E and S. Let's scale this, E and S, G and Y, to bring it inwards just a little bit. So now we got that standard edge that you always get on these type of lotion bottles. And then I will press E and S, and make sure that all of these are approximately the same size. E and S, E and S, E and S, E and S. Just going to continue doing that all the way until the end. Some people might say this is some unnecessary geometry. I'm not one of those people. I think this will make it look better. So I'm going to press on O in order to enable proportional editing. Then I'm going to press G and Y and bring this inwards ever so slightly until we get that standard looking bottom. Now I'm going to add a subdivision on this, and this is what it looks like right now. Not bad, except for this part, which looks terrible. What we can do is select this, Control B, and before we do that, we should actually apply the scale. Control A, apply the scale. Let's Control B. Now we've got this cool looking bevel. We're not going to use this anyway, so you don't really have to do that. Let's auto smooth. Well, we probably should add some loop cuts over here later on as well and make this sharp. Simply going to add an extra loop cut right here, bring this upwards. That makes it a bit more sharp, just a little bit. GG, move it upwards. All right, there you go. We've got the bottle, and now we have to make this part. Also very easy. Let's add another circle, mesh circle RX90. Let's bring it upwards. These should be separate parts, by the way. Let's go into edit mode. Press 1, G, E and Y. Let's bring this all the way up. And I see that it has some type of slope, so we're just simply going to do that. E and Y, scale this down, and E and S, 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 and F. Then we're going into proportional editing once again, G and Y. And let's bring this down ever so slightly. Cool. Auto smooth. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier, Control 3. Let's make a loop cut right there. Let's make a loop cut right here. And there you have it. A pretty beautiful looking bottle cap. All right, so now we're going to add a solidify modifier. Go to the modifiers, solidify. Let's increase this just a little bit. I just want to see what it looks like. Let's press on Alt Z so we can actually look through this. And let's add a solidify. You want your glass to have solidify, by the way, because if we're doing the materials and it doesn't have a solidify, it will look very fake. So we need to have that solidify in order to make it look professional. So I'm going to do something like this for now, and we'll see whether that works out or not. We also need to have an interior. So I'm going to click on this, Shift D, P, separate selection. Let's select this selection, then go into edit mode once again, Alt S in order to scale along the normals. And I'm going to bring it inwards ever so slightly until it has entirely disappeared right here. Alt C so we can see through it. Now it shouldn't come that far, so I'm going to press S and Y, scale this down until this is kind of correct. And this one I'm just going to take by hand, G and Y, and move it upwards. And now we do have the liquid already, and we should probably fill up the inside as well, by the way. So let's take all of this, press F. Let's take all of this, press F. We're just going to work with that, and if we need to change it later on, no problem, we will definitely do it. So this is the model. It's actually very simple. It's just a cylinder. All right, so now let's make this gooey mess right over here, and I'm not sure what it is. It's probably the contents of this container. I'm not even sure if this is a picture or if it's 3D as well. I can't really tell, which means someone did a very good job, or it's just a photo, and we are going to do a very good job. Shift A, plane. Let's first add the plane right here. And let's bring it down. We don't need that much of it. Just scale it up. This one is not very important. I'm going to move this over to the side. We don't need it anymore. And I'm simply going to try and replicate this. But before we do that, I'm actually going to place a camera. So Control, Alt, and 0 of the numpad. I'm going into the camera mode. I'm going into the output resolution. And I'm going to make this whatever I want. So 9020 by 9020 in order to make it square. I think doing this square is pretty cool. So go over into the camera, go to viewport display, enable composition guides, center, and let's make sure this is centered. Right now we can see it is not. So we want to make sure this is exactly on the green line. Green line, awesome. And we also make sure that it's exactly on the red line. Sakashimono yume wo kagi atsume. All right, so what we want to do right now is make that gooey stuff. And the way to do it is actually quite simple, but there are some things to keep into account. So I'm going to bring in a cube, scale this down, let's bring it underneath here. S and X, S and Y. And now we've got this gooey mess. Well, actually that's what it's supposed to be, but it's not quite there yet. So what I'm going to do is select all of this, add a loop cut. Let's apply the scale. Let's click on Subdivide. And let's do that again and again and again. Cool, so now we actually have some mesh to work with. Let's go over into sculpting. And the name of the game actually is simply to sculpt this into that shape. So we're going to do that. One thing you do want to keep in mind, it is going upwards as well. So it might come upwards over here and not stay on the plane. What you want to do, as you can see in the lighting right here, it's thinner over here than it is over here, which makes sense because the front lines of this gooey mess, if it's just been stretched out, we have some front lines because it's moving toward that area, and it's going to be thicker near this area because it's being pushed away by the bottle. So that kind of makes sense. So we want to make it thinner over here, thicker over here, and thinner over here. I hope that makes sense. And that's basically the way you need to do it with your sculpt. Now what I like to do is go to Dyn Topo, and I'm just going to add extra topology because my computer can handle it and I think it's fine. I use the draw brush for this right over here. I'm going to simply draw brush this into that shape. Now you can hold shift in order to smooth it out. You can press control to invert the way that it works. So if you simply press with your mouse, it's going to draw on it. But if you hold control, it will draw in it. And right now we can smooth this out and make sure that we are getting this type of effect. I'm first going to get the general shape like this. already keeping in mind what we want to do later with the lighting and stuff. Let's move this out. I'm simply going to follow the reference a bit more. I'm going to also press G to move some parts like this and shape it in the form that I would like to see it in. I'm simply going to shape this, and you can do this for yourself, make it in whatever shape you would like. So now we have the object, and one thing I forgot to do, let's go over to the layout tab. I'm going into the camera. I'm going to turn this camera into 142 millimeters. And I'm going to zoom it out. It makes it a bit more flat, and for these types of images that is fine. Usually use something like 80, but 142 completely fine right now. So let's do that. G and Z, let's bring it down. Maybe we can scale this up just a little bit. We are not going to use any depth of field. Scale it up doesn't have to be made to scale is what I'm trying to say. Right now we have the exact setup that we need in order to get this to work. It's just some blob that we sculpted. We made this product very fast, and now we need to do some texturing. So let's get started with the texturing process. So right now we are going to do the texturing for this object. So the first thing I'm going to do is head over into cycles view. So we need to set it to cycles 2 instead of EV, so cycles. Let's set this to GPU instead of CPU because it will be faster. And now we should be able to see something, and what we see is nothing. And that's great, because right now what we need to do is use the correct HDRI at first, which is what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to open up my HDRI manager, which is in Lumio, and the HDRI I'm going to be using is The Sky is on Fire. And I'm going to open this up and set the strength to 0.65 because it should be a little bit darker. And I'm going to open this up, and let's go over to the shader editor as well. So open this up. So I'm going to delete the principled BSDF. I'm going to turn this into a glass BSDF, and I'm going to plug this into the surface. Glass has an IOR of 1.5, which is correct. And I'm going to set this to 0.037. And that should be fine for our glass. Now, as you can see, due to the subdivision that we added to this, it has changed the shape, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to add 2 loop cuts, Control R, S, Y, and scale this up until we reach the end. So that's way too far. I'm going to click on our dash so it will separate it, and Y. And now we're going to bring it all the way until that edge. And we're also going to select this and that and press I. And inset it just a little bit, and now it's just a cylinder, exactly the way we like it. And I'm going to click on the dash icon once again to go back into the viewport mode. So that's it for the glass, and now we're going to do this material first. So let's go over here. I'm going to turn on my denoising so you can see a little bit better what's going on the entire time. I'm going to click on new, and now we need to make a color setup. Now the way this is structured is actually there are some darker areas, there are some lighter areas, and then there is this glitter type stuff going on in the lotion itself, and we're all going to add that. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring in a noise texture. I have this on a custom key called Shift 1, which means that I can do it very fast. Otherwise, you will just search for noise texture and bring it in here. Now I'm going to press on Ctrl T in order to bring the mapping in the texture coordinate node, which comes automatically if you use Node Wrangler, which you can enable in the add-ons. I'm going to bring in a color ramp as well, and we need 3 colors for this, but I'm getting to that later on. I'm going to plug the factor into this color ramp, and let's see what it's doing. Okay, first things first, let's increase this to about 120, and that will give us a lot of these small dots. Now we want to increase the contrast of those dots because we are creating this dot type of effect. Now these dots should be a different color than the rest of this white. But what I'm going to do is add an extra plus, bring this over here, and as you can see, we are getting a little bit more variation. Now it doesn't have to be that much, but this will make it better, trust me. Now this color should be this, well, kind of yellowish color that we see right here. And I'm just simply going to do that by giving you the hex code because I already figured out what these colors were. And how did I do it? I just played around until I got it. So I got the hex code, let's fill it in. So the first one has the hex code of hashtag FFE7C8FF. Then we have the second one, which has the hex code of B46260FF. And the last one, which has an hex code of DE506BFF. And this is the way the color ramp looks. Of course, you can play around with this in order to get to the desired result. We're going to plug this into the principled BSDF, naturally, and have a look at it. So it is starting to look like this blob, but it's definitely lacking some character, some reflectiveness, some transmissiveness magic. And there are only 3 things we need to do with this principal BSDF in order to make it look good. We're going to decrease the roughness somewhere to 0.2. We're going to open up specular and increase the IOR level, increase the anisotrophic, and play around with the rotation of this. As you can see, there will be some lighting switches right here. This will become more clear later on. So then we have the coat, which is the weight all the way up. Let's turn the roughness all the way down. And in this fashion, we will have something that looks very reflective. So let me add a light in order to demonstrate this without and with decoating. So here is the light. So first of all, this is without the specular. So the specular is making sure that we actually get those specular highlights in the material, and we can turn it around with the anisotrophic rotation. So this determines where the light is going. And if you want to know more about this, I got an entire free and full lighting course. It only takes 1 hour and it will teach you everything about lighting and photorealism. And I also have this coat right here, and if we increase the weight of that, it will bring over this layer where we have a bit more reflectiveness overall. You can really see it if you play around with the roughness. So I'm going to simply give this a roughness of 0, and you can see the difference. It just gives this extra glow over it. Now, we have the specular highlights, we have a bit more roughness, and we have a coat which is a layer on top of this, which gives it this kind of plasticky look. We are not finished right here because all of this is only 1 color, and we have, of course, these little dots right here, but they are not enough. So what we should do is add some more of these dots and add some more color variation. So basically what we want to have is this exact same setup. So I'm simply going to take all of this, Control-Shift-D, and this will make sure that it stays connected to the mapping node, but we will get a new setup of this. Then I'm going to add a hue, saturation and value node in order to manipulate this to become a little bit darker than the other one. So I'm going to add a mix color right here. This one will go into A because this is going to be color A, and this will be color B. Well, now it's mixing it, well, completely with each other, as we can see from the factor. But if we bring in a new noise texture, set the scale to 3, add another mapping node right here, set it to object, add a color ramp, factor into the factor, color into the factor of the mix color. What do we see? Now we have an even divide, so this area in the color ramp, this white area, will become this white color. So basically what we should do is plug this in, and now everything is the same color because we didn't manipulate anything, and we should change this color just a little bit. I'm going to make it darker. So decrease the value, increase the saturation a little bit maybe. And I don't think this looks very appealing, so we should probably decrease the scale to 0.3. And now we have this slight separation where some areas are darker and some areas are lighter. It's very subtle, but it does make it better. So increase this and play around with this until you get to what you like. I think this is pretty cool. So principal BSDF. Now we have some darker areas, we have some lighter areas, and it's actually working out quite all right. So play around with this hue, saturation and value node in order to get to the desired result. I think this looks pretty cool. But our white dots are kind of disappearing. They are maybe a bit too small even. So the way to fix that would be to increase this part right here. Let's do the same over here, by the way. And now they are becoming a bit more visible, but we should probably add some more that makes it look better. So I'm going to add a Voronoi texture. So Voronoi texture right here, Control T, object into the vector, add a color ramp, distance into this part. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, now we have all of these circles. So let's set the scale to 15. Let's set the roughness. Let's set the detail to 15. And now we should play around with the color ramp, something like this. And you can see that those look a little bit different, and I think that's good. Something like this, and we will add a bit more variation. This will give it some more depth instead of all being a noise texture. But what I also believe is what we are doing right now is not enough. So I'm going to add a mix color right here. This one should go into A. This one should go into the factor. And what we want to have happen is that this is this color, our pink color, and this one should become the yellow. So I'm actually going to invert this color, invert color, right after the color ramp. Invert the color. Now we already have this in white, so if I change this color, it will be blue or whatever. We don't want that. We actually want to have this color, so I'm simply going to drag it from the color ramp over to B in the mix color, and I misclicked. There you go. And now it should be added to this entire area. Now, I think it's a bit too much, So we should probably decrease it like so, maybe a little bit more over here. You can already see that this is making a massive difference, by the way. So if we simply look at this, it's all right, I guess. But now we actually get this variation that looks very glittery and it has a lot more depth. And this is exactly what we want to have happen. Now you can play around with these sliders in order to make it work. I'm not going to do that for this tutorial. What's next? What's next? Well, there's got to be something more than this. And that is correct. So I'm going to select this entire inner piece. We're going to select the inside. We're going to select our lotion. I'm going to drop down, copy material to select it. And now we have the same material, but this will make it seem very dark and too much see-through, as if what we are seeing is not the contents of the bottle, but looking through this bottle and seeing the underlying lotion. So I'm going to copy this material by clicking on this little button right here, and we're going to change some settings for this. First things first, let's add a hue and saturation and value right over here. And we're going to increase the value simply because it then becomes a bit more light. I'm going to increase the saturation just a little bit. And now we want to mix it again with some different colors. So mix color right over here. And we'll bring in a noise texture, Control T to get the mapping and texture coordinate node. Let's bring in a color ramp, plug it in, color into the factor. And I'm simply going to take this yellow color once again and drop it in this color. Now this should be object instead of generated, because otherwise it will look very weird. We're going to decrease this. And we don't want to have a lot of it, so I'm going to increase the power on this color ramp. And this is going to give us a slight color variation, which I saw in the reference image, and I think it looks better. So very small scale, something like this. No detail, no roughness. Let's increase the linearity and distortion, just to give it this type of curling effect. Which would be logical for a fluid. Let's bring it right over there and then decrease the amount of it. Maybe increase it a bit by improving the scale, playing around with the location if it's not on a place there where you would like to see it. And what we should also add is right here in the principal BSDF, increase the roughness, because now it will actually look like a solid in the bottle. And then we should add some subsurface, so increase the weight, and let's increase the top one to 1.2 or something. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, very good. I'm going to bring this over here. Let's copy this principal BSDF. And now let's add some gradients, because on the top there is an accumulation of this glitter as well as on the bottom. And I'm not sure how that works, but I saw it in the reference and we're simply going to recreate it. So bring in a gradient texture, Control T, set it to object. Let's add in a color ramp. Let's plug this into the color ramp. Let's have a look at it. Let's plug the generated into the vector and then Y to 90, and then it will work out. So now we've got some black area right over here and we've got a white area for the rest. I'm simply going to bring this black area all the way to the left, white area somewhere over there, I guess. And now we need to combine this with the same one that has it on the bottom. And it's simply going to be a Control-Shift-D, keep it all the same. Let's plug it right over there. And let's have a look at this one and invert it. Basically place the black to the right and the white should follow footsteps. Now Control 0, multiply. So we got the multiply right here, and now we have this darker area right there, darker area right here, and this will serve as our mask for this one. So we got this color once again. I'm going to copy the hex code. It's this sandish type color. Going into the base color to the hex code. Let's plug that in. But this will not work because, I don't know, when you just use one color, it looks too bland. So let's add in a noise texture, Control T, object into the vector, color ramp. This white color should be our hex code. And this darker color should be our hex code, but we're going to decrease the lightness of this ever so slightly. Color into the color, color into the base color. And this one can go into, oh, we didn't make it yet. We should select both of these principal BSDFs, Control 0. Now we get a mix shader, and I'm going to mix this shader with the multiplied mix color into the vector, this in the surface, and now you can see that it has been divided in a nice fashion. That's great, but we should probably tweak this a bit more in order to keep it natural. Now let's do the bottom plane. We got the bottom plane selected. Let's go to the base color. I'm going to use the hex code E79573FF, and this will give us that color. I'm going to increase the roughness all the way up because I don't want it to be reflective. So let's do this material right now. I've got it selected. I'm going to click on new. In the base color, I will use the hex code of C14282FF, and then I will increase the metallic all the way up. But this doesn't look very, let's say, realistic. I think it looks nice, but it's not really there when it comes to the reference, for example. So if I go into the specular and increase the IOR level and the anisotropic and play around with the rotation, now we're getting this effect where these line separations are starting to occur. And I think this is better for objects like this. Make sure it looks straight, but now we have this free, very simple color variation that kind of shows up simply by dragging some sliders. And this already looks a lot better than if we simply used a normal base color metal material. This looks a bit more real. So I'm going into the bottle right now, and there's a part that I didn't tell you about, but we need to select this area right here. This is not refracting properly, and we want to make sure that it looks a little bit better. So Shift D, P, separate the selection. Now we get this part. I'm going in edit mode, Alt S, and scale it down until it is fitting inside the bottle. And this gives us a bit more of that refraction that we actually need to make it look good. So it's kind of a hack, it's kind of a cheat, but it works. So right now add a transparent BSDF. Control 0 while selecting both of these BSDFs. And before we actually use this transparent BSDF, let's duplicate the material because we only wanted to apply to the new part that we just created. Let's give this a hex code of FFD0F9FF. And now it will be very pink, as if the metallic material from this is shining through the glass a little bit. And we should probably set this to 0.875. And now it will be invisible enough that it doesn't detract from our attention, but it will also be visible enough so that it adds to the render. So now let's bring in our textures for this material. Now usually when you want to add textures to a metallic material where the texture is kind of burned into the metallic, or it is added to it with the same type of metal, like the Apple logo in the iPhone tutorial, for example, then you would do it in the material and use a mix shader in order to mix those together and get different type of metallic effects, for example. However, in this case, we are adding like a sticker to the bottle. So we don't need to go into this material and change it all the way with all these mix shaders, and it wouldn't work out perfect anyway because we have multiple colors in these textures, and that would give us a lot of trouble. So instead, we are simply going to use the shrink wrap method. I'm going over here. I'm going to add, let's see, Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm going to add an image, mesh plane, and you can get all of these images for free on Patreon naturally. There it is. Bring it over here. I'm going to give it some geometry. So Control R on both sides. Make sure that we have little squares. Go over into the modifiers, add modifier, shrink wrap, then target, and select our bottle. And now we get this weird artifact. So what I'm going to do is press S and X and scale this until it actually works out. What we have then is the other one. So Shift A, image, mesh plane, right over here. I made it in DaVinci Resolve, this one. Add some geometry. And over here as well, let's add a shrink wrap. Let's select our target. And this is near perfect on the first try. That's pretty much it. Let's go into the material and let's decrease the roughness all the way. And let's kind of do the same for this one, somewhere over there. And that should be enough for what we are trying to do. So now there are only 3 more steps. We're going to make those droplets. We're going to make some oil drip out from underneath the lotion. Either way, we're going to do that first because it is quite easy. We're simply going to select our cool looking sculpted gel, Shift D, SZ, scale it to become a bit more flat. And then let's scale it outwards just a little bit. So just press S and let's bring it down so it's actually on the floor. Very cool. You already see this edge right here. You see it over there. It doesn't have to be this much, by the way. I'm going to click on plus, new. Let's select all of this, assign, and we've got some of that gel right there. So let's go into the principled BSDF, roughness all the way down. Let's go into the transmission all the way up. Let's add some code as well. So code, weight, and now we already get this plasticky type vibe, and it already looks a bit more oily. But I think we can also add a transparent BSDF. Let's mix it with the principal BSDF, Control 0. There you go. Did you see what that did? So it's a bit too dark now, but if we add some transparency, it becomes a bit more oily. So that's it for the oil. We kind of fixed that right now. I think it's a bit too much, so I'm just kind of going to scale it down. And now finally, let's add these droplets. So I'm going to add a UV sphere, and let's proportionally edit this in order to look like a droplet. I'm going to shade this smooth, and I will add this same glitter material at first. Copy material to selected. Now we've got this, but it looks a bit too dark, more like candy instead of the right material. So I'm going to copy this material, make a new one out of it, and I will add a transparent BSDF. Let's mix this with each other, and now we can determine how transparent it should be. Something like this probably looks a lot better. If you don't like this, you can also go over here to the transmission and increase that as well in order to make it look like this. I don't think this is necessary for what I'm trying to do, but I don't know. We can play around with this in order to make it look a bit more bubbly. I'm going to place this into a collection called Bubbles or Droplets. Yeah, click on 7, duplicate this, play around with the proportional editing to make it look like a separate and unique droplet. And now you can simply place a couple of those wherever you like. Now this is the basic setup of this entire render. And the only thing that's left to do is to add some lighting to it. And this is going to be some pretty advanced lighting, but this will make it look a whole lot better than what we've got right here. But I am not that pessimistic. It already looks pretty good. I think if you take this light, increase the scale, and place it right over there and increase the power, you probably have a render that's semi-good enough. I don't know. I don't like this. I don't like this. There's a lot to be done with it. Okay, so I'm going to make different lighting collections. I'm going into the light, area light, and I will add this. I will give this its own collection, and I will call this the bottle lights. That's what I'm going to call it. And we're first going to do that one. Before we continue, we're also going to select this, all these things from this bottle. So like so. I'm simply going to select everything from the bottle. And I'm going to place this into a collection, so bottle. Now I'm going to select this light that we just created, and I'm going to add light linking. So light linking, let's select our bottle lights collection, and it should apply to the bottle. Add light linking, and now you will be able to see, and if we increase the power of this, it is not functioning on the plane, it is only functioning on the bottle. And now we have full control over the way our bottle looks. So let's take this light, and let's R and Y, and let's bring it all the way over here. I think we just need some light. So I'm going to edit this SXX. Let's give it a different type of shape. That looks pretty interesting, but I believe that this is too harsh and there's some overlap going on that I do not like. So I'm going into the object shader editor, use nodes, and then I will add a gradient texture. Gradient texture, Control T, UV into the vector, color ramp right over there. And now let's add a map range node as well. Plug it all into the strength. And as you can see, we now have a harsh line right over here. And we can move the light as a gradient. And what I'm going to do is bring this over here, add a new color, bring it to the right of the white. Let's make it black. And now we have some control over this area as well. As you can see, something like this. We can select B-spline in order to make it more of an ease. And there you have that stripe that we are also seeing in this render. So now we need a bit more of a strong light in order to create some separation in this, because it is very flat and dark. So let's add an area light, bring it upwards, scale it up a little bit. Now looking like this. Let's increase the power of this by a lot, and let's shine it like to the side. Let's make sure that we are getting the cool and good looking reflections right here. So SXX in order to scale it down and make sure that these reflections look a bit more supreme. Like this should do the trick. We also have a pretty cool gradient on the background right now. So it's a bit more dark over here. It's a bit lighter over here. Looks kind of cool, but I don't think it should work in the bottle. So it's annoying me. We're going to select this light, Let's press M. And let's call it not bottle. And then I will go over to the not bottle and add light linking to the bottle. So now it should work only on the bottle, but I'm going to toggle the collection, include and exclude, and now it should work on everything except for the bottle. That's the way it works. So now we have this cool looking separation and background. So now I'm going to add another light right here. So I'm going to click on gradient lights, and it just created a gradient light for me. Control Z, and let's make sure it's a lot smaller. I already played around with it, which is why I have some settings here. Something like this. I'm going to rotate it around, bring it over there to the bottle cap. Yeah, something like this. Looks pretty cool. This is what it looks like right now. We should probably increase some part of the gradient. So the from min should be, we've got a sphere. It should be a horizontal. Yeah, there you go. So as you can see, if I place it on the plane right here, this makes it a bit more clear. You can see that we are making this gradient go that way. And now all we need to do is rotate it towards this bottle cap. But that's how we get that nice streak. So one thing that we could try to do, so add a new light. Let's make sure it only works. Let's give it a collection. Droplet lights. Let's select it, droplet light, and make sure it only works on the droplets. Add light linking. Let's increase the power. You will see that it only works on the droplets, which is nice. If I now select shadow caustics, go into one of these droplets and select, where is it? Go to the object properties, go to shading and select cast shadow castings, and then to the plane and receive shadow castings. That's usually a method that works, but I wanted to show you this because right now it really doesn't. And I'm not entirely sure why this is. Maybe it is due to the shape of this or because it's going through it. I'm not entirely sure why it doesn't work. So I found something to solve that problem. And that something is in the Ultimate Gobo pack. So the asset browser, and I made some caustic setups by placing glasses and shining lights through them on a black cloth. And this is what came out of it. So we have some real glass caustics right here, which we can use in order to fake the idea of caustics. So right now, if I just add this, it's a spotlight. This is what it looks like. We should probably increase the radius because this looks a bit too much like a glass. But I'm simply going to rotate this around and place all of these caustics in a direction that makes sense with the rest of the light. So in this case, I placed it right over there. So I should probably bring the caustics to the upper side, the right upper side. And then in the light, we can increase the radius to make it a bit more soft and natural, decrease the spot size to make it smaller, or go into the shader editor to increase the value and thereby make it smaller. So something like this. And you want to make sure that this is in a collection, so spotlights. And then when you duplicate it and place it around all of these droplets, it will really add this extra feel to the render. It gives it a lot more depth. You probably didn't even notice it when I showed the original image in the community post, but this adds a lot to it. So I'm simply going to duplicate everything and place it all around this mesh. And if you do not have the Ultimate Gobo pack, I guess something else that you can try is bring in a light, point light, and I don't know where it is. Where is it? It's right over there. And bring it like right over here and play around with the radius to make it a bit more soft. Something like that. And it will give you a bit less detail, but you will be able to try and get a similar type of effect at the very least. RZ, let's say you think the bottle is a bit too much underlit, but you don't want to have the harsh reflection from an area light in this bottle. Then what you can do is add a light area, increase the power, and let's shine it at this plane. And we can now place the area light underneath the plane. And yes, this makes a difference. So if I place it right here, you can see this harsh line. But if we shine at it from underneath the plane, then we actually get some pretty cool soft lighting on the side. So that's just something that you can try in order to get better lighting. We are simply creating bounce light. That's something that you can do. I didn't do it for the original render, so it's not necessary. Just wanted to give you that little tip. But right now you have everything in order to create a beautiful looking render. I hope this tutorial was useful for you and that you can now create something very beautiful. Show me your own beauty products and what you use this technique for. And I highly recommend checking out this video next, where I teach you everything about lighting and photorealism. Thanks for watching and subscribe. So today we are going to be recreating this beautiful product image step by step. So let's get started straight away. I am going to start off by deleting all of this, and then I will bring in a reference image, which I got before. You can get it on Patreon for free. So now the image is in our field, but it is being projected exactly from our viewport direction. So I'm going to click on Alt-R in order to undo the rotation, RX90 in order to get it up straight, GZ, hold Control, and let's bring this upwards until it is somewhat on the ground plane if I press on 1. Now, of course, there's a bit of perspective in this image, as we always encounter, but we are going to tackle that by simply doing it by hand. So what I'm going to do is G and Z, bring this down. I will bring in a mesh, you already guessed it, a mesh circle. You're getting so smart following this channel, you know so much. G and Z, we're going to bring this up, I'm going to scale this down, and now we have one line that we should follow, and I'm going to follow this line. So I'm going to follow the left side of this image. Now, bring it down, very simple. There is slight slope right here, so we're going to add that. I'm going into edit mode, press 1 so we can see all the vertices, and I'm going to press E and bring it up in the first direction. So press on Z and let's bring it over here. E and Z, let's bring it over there. And once again, we have this sloping inwards type of effect. So I'm going E and Z, scale it down, simply follow the reference. It's not that hard. E and Z and scale it inwards, maybe somewhere over here. And now I'm going to press E and S, make sure that we have one little area right here that's a bit more flat. And as a matter of fact, I'm even going to select all of this, SZ0, and now we're absolutely certain that it's flat. I'm going to select the inner line, and we're simply going to bring this upwards. And I believe this is inside of the bottle cap, so I'm simply going to bring this up, and I will fill this up. Are we going to show this to the viewer? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we can simply ENS, ENS, ENS. ENS, 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 and F. Make sure the squares are approximately the same size. Click on O in order to enable proportional editing, G and Z, and we're going to bring it down ever so slightly to get this type of effect that you always get on these type of bottles, you know what I'm saying? So I'm going to select this line right now, and before we actually do something, I'm going to press on Control A and apply the scale. So now we've got this line, I'm going to press Control B, maybe add a little bit more of these, so a couple, and keep it small. I'm going to add a subdivision, but before we do that, let's make the bottom first. So I'm going to select this, press on 1, and let's go over here. It has this standard type of slope, so E and Z. This really isn't that hard. Let's disable proportional editing, E and Z, and scale it inwards. So now we have this type of effect going on. And I will press E and S because I feel like there might be a slight indentation in here. I'm not sure, I don't have the bottle. I'm just going to interpret it. So E and S. Whoa, what's going on, people? I'm going to bring this upwards simply so we know what this area was. And then I'm going to be pressing E and S. You might be wondering, why are you modeling through this entire plane and didn't just bring it backwards a little bit? I could have done that. I definitely should have done that. But now I'm going to continue with my stupidity. So E and S, E and S. It's a sign of bravery to continue being stupid, you know. E and S, E and S, especially if it's in public. E and S, E and S, E and S, E and S, and F. Press on O to enable proportional editing, G and C, and let's bring this upwards. Make sure that we're not moving that line right here that we specified before. Let's bring it up. If we do it too much, you can see it is moving. So something like this should probably be pretty cool, maybe a little bit less. I'm going to select this entire line, SZ, proportional editing turned off, SZ0, and now we're absolutely certain that it's straight. We need the bottle cap. So we're going to make that as well. Why not? And the way we're going to do it is pretty simple. I'm actually just going to select this line right here. I'm going to press Shift D, P, separate the selection, and now it should be a separate selection right there. I'm going to scale it upwards. I'm going to Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry, and let's scale that up a little bit. Press on 1 so we can actually see what we're doing. Right over there seems totally fine. Let's go into Edit Mode. Press E1, E, what's going on, people? I'm going to press on E and Z. Let's bring it upwards, and I'm not going to bring in those indentations at first. I'm going to do all of those at the same time. So let's bring this bottle cap all the way over there until it looks like this. Slight eye interpretation right there, but no problem. E and S, 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 E and S. You could also grid fill this if you'd like. I like E and S-ing. It's also pretty fun to say out loud. O, proportional editing, G and Z. Let's bring that down just a little bit, like so. And now let's press on Alt-C in order to see through it. And now we need to create some loop cuts. So let's select this. And well, we can either do a lot of it, which is fine. So I'm going to select this. And of course we have a lot of mesh right now. You can do it in any other type of fashion that you like. I'm simply going to do it like this. I will select 3 of those, and I will do the same right over here, and I will do the same right over here. Now, if I'm correct, there's 2 lines in between all of these, which means that they are evenly spaced. And now I'm going to press on I. Before we do that, let's apply the scale, Control A. I'm going to press on I, and let's have a look. Let's see how deep it goes. This rabbit hole. E. Somewhere over here should be fine. And I believe if we now press Control minus, we only have the middle one left. I'm going to press Alt E, extrude the faces along normals, and bring it inwards just a little bit. Now, if we add a subdivision surface modifier, it should probably look exactly like the reference image. And I was correct, because I've been doing Blender for such a long time. I know these things by heart. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier to this one as well. And that looks pretty good. Let's add a shade smooth. Let's do that for this one. All right, so now our bottle is finished. So we should probably give it a texture. So G and Y. Let's bring this backwards. And where's the reference? Oh, there it is. Cool. This looks like a gradient. This looks like glass. This looks like, I don't know, some glass type of metallic maybe. It seems metallic-ish. So now let's do the textures. First I'm going into DaVinci Resolve in order to get this text and this logo, whatever it is. And that shouldn't be too hard. Let's do it right now. I'm going to show you exactly how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to add a text plus node. Text plus right in here. I already know that it's going to be a serif font and not a sans serif font. It has these little squiggly things on the letters. Let's see, Sauvage. So this is sans serif. We actually want with some serif, like this. But there's probably a better one. Let's have a look at the internet. Oh, it's a custom font created for the Sauvage brand. But we're just going to take something that looks like it. Maybe something like this. Increase the tracking. Sauvage. Very easy stuff. Let's add a background. Now the background is on top. We don't want that. The background should be on the bottom. So let's switch these over. Background, transparent. I'm also going to make it a square. So let's turn this into a 1080 part. Auto resolution turned off. Auto 1080. And now we have the Sauvage. I'm going to place it upwards. And we also need some Dior. So let's add some more text. And I don't know what this looks like. All I know is that the first letter was capitalized. Cool. So let's save this image. And things are moving along nicely. So let's bring in our image. Image, mesh plane, Sauvage, RZ90. Let's go into cycles view. Let's turn it into cycles. Let's turn it into GPU. Let's turn on the denoise. Let's go into the lighting, because we need some light in order to see what we're doing. and increase this. Whoopa. Like so. Where is it? There it is. And we've got some text. It's inverted as x-1, and now it's not inverted anymore. Let's scale this up, and I feel like this should be a bit bigger. Should be a bit more down. That's actually pretty close. However, this should be separated from the other part. So separate this selection. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And now that is near perfect. So let's give this a shrink wrap. Shrink wrap modifier, but it will not work because we don't have geometry. So let's add some geometry by adding some loop cuts. Let's select the Dior one, more loop cuts, and let's select the nearest surface as a target. And now it has disappeared. So let's bring it outwards with the offset just a little bit. I'm going to do the same with this one. Shrink wrap, target, offset. Awesome. So now we have this. Very cool. Let's go over to this material. Let's add a HDRI real quickly. So I'm going into Lumio, HDRI browser. And now I'm going to select an HDRI. I don't know which one. Let's give it a try. So right now we are going to do the material for this object, and I've already brought in an HDRI called Quattro Quanti 2K, and you can get it on HDRI-. Now I'm going to make a new material for this bottle, and I'm going right over here and I will add a gradient texture, Ctrl-T. Let's keep it in generated because it works better for gradient texture for some reason. Color ramp, and let's set the rotation on the Y to 90 because then it's starting from the top and the bottom. Very good. What we want to do is make sure that we get this type of gradient effect, and if we add another color with a plus, you can already see how we can create this type of look. We should probably make sure that it's also a bit more varied using a color, using a noise texture. So let's bring in a noise texture. Select both of these, Ctrl-0, and perhaps we can set it to multiply, and then everything black will be black. I don't know if that made any sense, but as you can see, when we play around with this slider, we can change the way the overall look of this goes. So I'm going to decrease the scale because I don't want it to be that extreme. I'm going to decrease the detail and decrease the roughness. Let's play around with the linearity and the distortion just a little bit. But I actually don't want it to occur all the way over there. And the way that I'm going to fix that is by using the color dodge. And using the color dodge, we also have the whites here protected, but we still have some control over this black area. You can already see how you can make like a fire transition if you use this effect with a bit more scale, of course, and then you get some cool fire type transition. But that's not the goal of this video. We're simply going to make something very cool. So let's go over here and let's go over there. Let's make this a bit more dark because it should be dark. So let's park this right here for a second because I want to make this inner area as well. And it seems to be, I don't know, a bit more circular, brought down. It's kind of like it's the opposite of what we've got underneath here, but then it's going on inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this one and this one. I'm going to press Shift-D, B, separate the selection. Let's select it. Now I'm going into edit mode. Select all, Alt-S to scale the normals and bring it inwards. Now we've got that done just a little bit more, so it seems. Going to press on 1, let's look through this, and it should be moving upwards just a little bit. So let's select all of this, bring it upwards, then select this outer loop, E and Z, let's scale it down, E and Z, let's scale it down. And I'm just going to fill it with F in this particular case. Then right here, I'm going to fill it with F, and we have a subdivision on this, which gives it this weird looking shape. So I'm going to press I once more and make sure that it's a bit more rounded off like that, but not too rounded off. Auto shade smooth on both of these logos. Cool, so we fixed that real quickly, and the interior should probably just be glass. So I'm going to give this its own material, click on plus, let's go into edit mode, select all, let's assign, let's remove the principal BSDF and bring in a glass BSDF, set to 1.5 IOR, BSDF in the surface, and yeah, let's go back into our material and actually finish this up. This should go into the principal BSDF. The principal BSDF should have a transmission, because now we actually do have glass, and as it occurs to me, the black area is not glass, the white area is the glassy part. Let's decrease the roughness so we can be sure. So a bit more like 0.2 or something, but the glass is not that realistic because we should add a solidify modifier. So let's add a modifier, solidify, let's bring it in there, and the thickness doesn't have to be that thick, but it also shouldn't be that thin. Now that seems a bit more like accurate glass as opposed to what we had before. Don't think this one looks pretty good though, so let's add another loop cut right there to make it a bit more sharp. So the black area doesn't have any light, so we should flip this around, flip the entire script, and I'm going to give this a color. So it should be dark and it should be blue, and it should be dark blue. And then right over here for the middle one, it should be blue, but it shouldn't be as dark as our previous blue. We want to emulate this effect right there. Let's see how we can do it. It's a very simple game of playing around with sliders. Something like this, but I feel like it's a bit more, yeah, indigo, right? Like indigo. And then let's increase the white as well. And let's make a new one. And let's also make this some type of blue. All right, so that kind of looks like the Sauvage bottle. I think we did a great job there actually. Not a great fan of this text. I am going to stretch it out a bit more, SXX. That seems a bit better. Same goes for this one. Not entirely sure about the glass area that we see right there. I think that we can change a couple of things to make it look better, because it's a bit too washed out or something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a glass BSDF, and I will take this color ramp, Control-Shift-D, and the only area that really matters is the white one. I'm going to delete this one, minus, I'm going to delete that one, and this one should be black. I'm going to add a mix shader node, Control-0, color in the factor, and it seems to me like it should be inverted. Invert the color, and now this part is the glass from the glass shader, while the other part is the glass from the principal BSDF. And of course we can play around with this in order to manipulate the style a bit, but I think that's too much. Also, maybe the roughness here should be going down a little bit. Play around with the color ramps until we get to a desired result. Let's also take this area, Shift D, P, separate the selection. Let's select this, let's bring it inwards. Let's remove the material from this and give it a new material and make it glass. Oh, I'm fucking it up. Glass BSDF in the surface. Let's go into edit mode. Alt C, let's select the entire edge. Alt S, G and Z, E and S, G and Z. Let's just make a shape that makes it look a bit more glassy like so. Gives it a bit more detail, looks a bit better. I think it's cool, just going to keep it. And now it looks like this, pretty cool looking. Let's give it a white background real quick just to see if everything is still moving along in the right direction. Either way, let's do the bottle cap and let's make it a black metallic. So let's make it black, let's make it metallic. Let's set the metallic to 0.7. Well, the only thing that's bothering me is the interior of this. So let's add a solidify to it as well. Let's bring it inside. Ah, there you go. That's more of the effect that I'm looking for. But now we can use this for something else. So let's go over here. Let's select this entire thing. Shift S, cursor to selected. Let's add a empty. So let's select all of this. Empty last. Control P, object keep transform. And now everything should be parented to the empty. So now let's actually bring this bottle into a cool looking environment. And oh, it's actually dark blue. Oh wow, we should make this dark blue, guys. Just a bit more like this. Metallic all the way up. Let's make it a dark blue. So let's create the rest of this part. Now we see some area with a waterfall. This is going to be a tough one, but we can see that the contrast is created by using a light background, using a dark bottle on the foreground, so we actually get some contrast. And we're going to sculpt some rocks and make sure that they have a nice and wet looking material. Let's turn the HDRI off and actually make it transparent. And now we can start working on the actual project. So let's add a cube. I'm going to bring it down, to bring it right here, and make sure that our glass is standing on it. And then I will add a very quick plane on the background, RX 90, G and Y, and there's actually two methods to solve this. We can either place an image behind this, or we can try and make it with a noise texture. And you know what, it's quite fun. Let's try to do that first. Let's plug a noise texture into the emission, Control T, color ramp. Let's have a look at this. Well, it should probably be very close by to each other. We have a lot of white, almost no black. Something like this, and the black can probably be white-ish. Something like that. We have those curling corners, so what we can do is add a gradient texture. Control T, let's have it be in a color ramp, factor, color ramp. Right now we have this, and that's great. Let's add a noise texture. Let's add a mix color node. Let's set the mix color to color dodge. Let's increase the scale. And let's play around with the color ramp in order to get that type of effect. Something like this should probably do the trick. And then we will add those two together. Control 0. Let's have a look at this. Mix, multiply, that's great. RY 180 and do it like this. So let's plug that into the emission. Could use some color. So let's make it a bluish tone together with, well, blue like this. And let's also plug this in the alpha. Yeah, that makes a bit more sense. Let's add a background and let's make it a bit more rocky. But for now, let's first make it rough. Alright, so now at least we have some reference to work with. So let's sculpt some rocks. I'm going to use E to extrude this all the way over here. And then I will select this area and extrude it upwards all the way over there. I will click on one, Control Alt 0 in order to place a camera. And I'm already going to place the camera so that the Sauvage is exactly in the middle. So let's go over to the camera, view per display, composition guides, center, and make sure that it is exactly centered, like right there. We're going to shoot it a little bit from below. So let's make sure the camera is pointed upwards. G and ZZ. Let's increase the focal length, maybe to something like 100. Bring it backwards just a little bit, G and Z. Select all of this, subdivide it a couple of times, like this. Then I will Control A, apply the scale, go into sculpting. And right now we can basically just change the shape of this. I will first make the general shape. Either way, let's first make sure that we get some rocky type shapes in this, and that the general shape is to our liking. And then we're going to add a lot of detail. Okay, so this is basically it. I'm going to turn the Dyn Topo on, and I will set the Dyn Topo to 3, which means that it will add quite a bit of geometry. So I'm now going to draw on this and give it some actual details. Let's bring it in here, and well, I'm going to use the Draw Sharp actually, because I think for rocks it looks a little bit better. Yes, and what I'm also going to use is the clay strips, but I'll get to that. Just make sure that there's enough variation going on. Clay strips, those look best for rocky types of surfaces, I find. You can also get a brush that looks like rock. I just like doing it like this, a bit more with a circular motion in order to distract the viewer that it's not actually straight, that we're not doing our mechanical hand movements. We are artists. You want to make sure that some of these parts are fairly thick and thin, so there's a lot of separation here. Otherwise you will not really see it. So if it's too subtle, You won't really see it, so make sure that it's quite extreme and pronounced if you do it. So something like this, for example, probably will be able to cast a shadow. And this is just an artistic process. I'm probably going to make a time lapse out of this so you can see what I'm doing, but basically just draw on the rocks, man. Just draw on the rocks. All right, just a little tip in between. I'm also going to use the crease brush, the crease sharp to be exact, because using this you can make some pretty rough type of destruction in the rocks, like this. All right, so now that we've got our pretty cool looking rock, we can texture all of these materials and make sure that we actually get a pretty cool looking render. So let's go over into object mode in the layout tab. Let's click on 0 and we should give this a cool texture. So let's click on new. And usually what I would do is simply go into the asset browser, find my stone texture, which I probably have right over here, this one, drag it on there, and then I would go to the shader editor and change the color of this to be a bit more dark using the hue, saturation and value, decreasing the value, make it dark, and decrease the roughness in order to make it wet. But instead of creating a whole new rock material, I'm simply going to show you how I created this one so you can copy the settings if you like. I also have a tutorial on this. It's pretty old, it's like 2 years old or something, but there I explain step by step how I created this. Either way, there's a texture coordinate with an object in the mapping. The mapping is going into 2 noise textures, but you can simply check it out. So this is the noise color. Then when I zoom out, we have the bump pattern. So this is creating the bump. These are the different settings. Then we have the multiply of this one, which makes sure that the noise texture is combined in this multiply. And then we combined what we created with the bump in this color ramp with this multiply. Okay, so this multiply is going into here. This entire bottom section is going into this multiply. And this part is the normal. So this entire area is the bottom normal. Then this normal is from this upper noise texture right here. Then this final bump is from this noise texture right here. And this was originally moss, so it's actually green, and you get a moss type of effect right here, as you can see. So if I had to break that down, this is the first noise texture pattern. It's some smaller dots right here on some grayish tones. So we have the grayish tones, the smaller dots combined together. Then we have this area right here, which looks like the actual rock material. It's pretty rough. It has some edges and stuff like that. Color ramp didn't do anything actually, didn't play around with it. Combined both of those together, so this one and this one combined together makes this one. And then we have some normal maps, so the normal map on that one, normal map on this one. All of them are like 0.7 except for the final one, which is 1. And then we have a noise texture which looks like this. It has detail and roughness all the way up and some scale, nothing going on here. And that determines where the moss will be, as you can see. Okay, and then we have a hue, saturation and value, which makes this dark, which is what I did for this one. Roughness all the way down because it should be reflective. So that's it for that material. Now for the material on the back. Let's go over here. I changed some things. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about it. So we have this outer area. And the details should probably go up. Roughness. Just a little bit. Something like that. Maybe some distortion as well. But not too much. Really not too much. Something like this should probably do the trick. So we have a noise texture, 1.1 scale, 10 on the detail, distortion to 5. And this is both pretty much white. And I played around with this. And this one is a little bit wider than this one. It's not that much of a difference, but it does make a difference. So we play around with this and make sure that we actually have a pretty cool pattern right over there. Something like this. And we can also play around with the scale, stuff like that. We have a scale on the X of 2.55 and on the Y of 0.15. And here we have a multiply bringing all of this together because we had the gradient and we had this noise texture and we brought it together, removing this area, plugging it into the alpha, which means that it is removed, and then we add a color to it. I added 3 colors, so I can decide a bit more how it will look in the end. Take this same rock. I will take this and bring it a bit more back towards this area. We can even add some loop cuts. Proportional editing with O. Let's drag it out and make it a weirder type of shape. Then let's duplicate the material and make it darker. So strength down. Something like this. Maybe some more. Even beneath that one. And we can also scale it, perhaps, maybe a bit wider. Give it some variation. Shade it smooth. Shade it smooth. Let's go into the camera. Camera, viewport display, passe-partout. And now it looks like this. Pretty close to the reference if you ask me, but we need to do some lighting work in order to get this done. So let's first add a fill light right over here. So RX 90, and now that is looking towards the glass, and that is fine. Let's increase the power, and now we can actually see some of that detail here. Shouldn't be too strong though. Perhaps we can also go into the bottle, play around with the gradient. Let's turn this up a bit so we get a bit more blue. Let's place all of this in its own collection. So let's go to the bottle. Let's select everything from the bottle. All right, let's place all of this in its own collection. I'm going to call it Sauvage. And now I'm going to make a new light right over here. And let's place that in its own collection, bottle lighting. Then I'm going to open up Lumio, go to the light linking. Let's select the collection. Collection should be the bottle lighting. The target collection should be the Sauvage Dior bottle. Add light linking. And now this, if I increase the power, should only work on the bottle and not on the rocks. And that is the case. So let's go over here, scale this up, RX 90. And let's play around with this until we get something that looks pretty cool. I'm first going to do the bottle cap, something like this. Looks pretty cool. Now let's duplicate that one, be pretty soft. So let's decrease the power by a whole lot, but make sure it has some of these lines. Very low power and a bit more bluish, like this. Then right over here, Aldar RX 90. And now I'm going to take this light that has a light linking collection. I'm going to RZ this, bring it over to this side. And maybe something like this. Could be pretty cool. Let's bring the roughness all the way down. And I want this to be a gradient light actually. I'm actually just going to delete this gradient light. Let's add a gradient light, horizontal. I also like adding a plane so I can see what it looks like from before. So this is the gradient, RC 180. Let's rotate it towards the glass. And we're going to increase the height. Looks pretty cool. But it can be blue though. Let's go over here, let's make it blue. And now let's add the final lighting pieces. So an area lights right here with a bit more brightness around this edge. Let's duplicate this, Aldar RY90, RC 180. And I guess it could be moved backwards just a little bit to give it this slight rim light maybe on the side, you know. And finally, let's maybe place a light right behind it to shine some light through the glass. Yeah, that makes a difference. And this maybe needs some more lighting as well. So let's aim a light at the rocks. And let's make sure it only works on the rocks. So I'm going to make a new collection, rocks lighting. And the rocks should be rocks. Let's go into light linking. I'm going to select rocks lighting. And rocks, add light linking. There you go, looks pretty cool. Perhaps it should be a harsh light, something like this, and then less strong. Alright, that looks pretty cool. Maybe to fill in some shadows, I'm going to place a bigger one right there. Alright, so right now let's add the final product, and then we're going over some techniques in order to make this a little bit better. And that will be the final part. So I'm going to first add a curve path right over here. Let's turn on the overlay so we can actually see what we're doing. And well, let's use this with the proportional editing. G and Z, rotate it. And let's go over into the geometry and let's actually give it geometry. Extrude, and then we will have this type of plane, which is nice. And no bevel, we are fine with the bevels. So I'm going to bring this outwards and it should curl somewhat around this bottle. Something like this, maybe like so. I'm going to press E, that's great. So now we can move this a bit more towards that side, like this. That looks pretty cool. So let's turn this into a mesh. Let's select it, convert to mesh. Now let's add a solidify. And now it's got a bit more thickness. Control 1 to add a subdivision surface modifier. And now we get a pretty cool looking whatever the hell it is. We should add Dior to that, and it's blue. So we already have the image which says Dior. So let's take that. We should probably UV unwrap this. UV unwrap, angle based. And this is only part of it. We want the Dior to be white. I'm actually going to use it as a mask. So let's bring in a new principled BSDF, which is going to have this type of blue. So I'm going to already select it, a pretty dark bluish tone. Select both of these principled BSDFs, Control 0, plug in this image into the vector of the mix shader and unwrap it, unwrap angle based. Let's go to the UV editor and see what it looks like. So it looks like this, and it should be better if it's straight. So I'm going to unwrap it with minimum stretch. And can we now see Dior? We can, as x-1. Now let's add a noise texture, Control T, object in the vector, color ramp, vector into the vector, and let's see what it looks like. It's way too big, so maybe we can set it to 1, scale of 1. Increase the black area just a little bit and make it less black because we don't want it to be entirely reflective, just a little bit. Roughness into the roughness of this blue tone, and now we get a bit more variation in the way this looks. I think it can be brought down on the white one as well. Just a little bit. So now in order to finish this render, all we have to do is go into DaVinci Resolve and make some adjustments. So I'll be right back with you in DaVinci Resolve in order to finish this image. So right now I'm in the color page of DaVinci Resolve and I've got a render right here. I see a couple of things that I might want to change. So I'm going to bring in a film look creator. I'm going to drag it on here and immediately you will see that the entire render changes. First of all, right here under presets, we're going to make this cinematic. And immediately you can see that it becomes more cinematic. Now, I'm going to set this to Rochester because I think it gives a better blue ratio in the entire shot. I will increase the exposure by a bit to make sure that it seems like an actual camera because sometimes things are a bit overexposed and I think that's totally fine in certain cases. And I'm also going into the halation, turn it off, bloom, turn it off. Now we got rid of this problem right here, and under film gate I'm going to bring this down in order to not obscure the entire render too much. So now we have this, so this is the before, this is the after. We already have a pretty cool looking render, and I'm going to press on Alt S to bring in a new node. And I will make this node a bit more blue in the gamma, and the gamma is basically like the midtones. So I'm going to bring this down. By the way, I'm in this tab right over here, color wheels, and then click on the color wheels, and I'm going to make it a bit more blue, and as you can see that makes the render just a little bit better. I'm going to press Alt S once again, and I might want to play around with the darkness and the light values right here. So bring down the midtones, maybe bring up the highlights, and this is starting to look pretty cool. But I think in the film look creator node that we got right here, the grain might be a bit too strong, as you can see. So let's disable it and enable it. It does add to the render, so I don't think it's that annoying. I'm just simply going to bring the amount down by a little bit. And then I'm heading over into the Fusion tab in order to add some more lens distortion and stuff like that. So let's go over there. All right, so right now we have our image, and I'm going to turn this off for a second. Maybe make it a bit bigger for y'all to see. I'm going to bring in a lens distortion node, not the lens distort, but the distort. distortion. And then I will go into the inspector and I will decrease the amount by bringing this upwards. And maybe something like this, and you see a slight difference which emulates a certain camera effect. Then I'm going to bring in a transform node right over there and scale it up so we still get all of our image instead of it being removed. But first, before the lens distortion node, I will bring in a prism blur and I will turn the aberration strength all the way up, the blur strength all the way down, and the aberration distance is what we want to play around with in order to get some chromatic aberration around these edges. And now we've got some prism blur, and this changes the image some more. We get some cool looking edge effects right here, which a lot of cameras do. You can probably see it on me right now, and I often have that when I cut myself out for a thumbnail. So this is an effect that you might want to emulate. And then we got the lens distortion, the transform node, and for now I'm just going to leave it like this. So this is our before and this is the after. So I hope you learned a lot in this tutorial in order to create a product image like this in a pretty special environment. If you want to support me as a creator as well as support yourself, then I highly recommend checking out the first link in the description, which is going to be the King of Light bundle pack. And if you want to know how to make this cool product visualization render, or you want to have a step-by-step guide on how to do this, then I highly recommend checking out one of those 2 videos next. So today we are going to be creating this render, and yes, we are going to use a liquid simulation. So without further ado, I'm going to start straight away. I will delete all of this and I will bring in the previous product, namely the Sauvage Dior that we made in the previous tutorial. So I'm going to bring it and place it right over here. I will bring this upwards and I will add a plane, simply for reference. Now I will add a UV sphere, which I will place right here, or perhaps we want the liquid to come from the side. So let's place it on the x-axis, bring it up. Now let's create a cube. Let's make sure that it's on the plane. You can hold Control in order to snap it to the grid. Now I'm going to press S and scale it up from the 3D cursor. So we have to select 3D cursor right here, scale it up, something like this. Then I'm going to press S, Shift Z in order to remove the Z from the scale. And I will scale this up all the way over here. Now, this is not to scale, by the way. So this bottle is approximately 3 meters. And that's good in this case because we want to make sure that our liquid simulation will actually work. If you make the particles too small, things will look weird and the calculations might not even work out the way you planned. So I will select this UV sphere first. This will be our inflow object. So I'm going to the physics tab, fluid, and select flow. Then I will select liquid instead of smoke, and instead of geometry I will select inflow. This is kind of counterintuitive because inflow makes sure that there's water coming out of it, and outflow makes sure that the water is being deleted. So it's kind of counterintuitive. You think that inflow would be the deleting part and the outflow would be water coming out of it. That's not the case. Let's select inflow. I'm going to set this to 3. Initial velocity should be turned on, and I will set the initial x to a higher value, something like 10. Then I will select the domain and go to fluid. Make sure that this is a domain. Very good, but it's not a gas, it's a liquid. And we have to play around with the resolution division. Later on, this is going to be very important if you want to have a quality render. I'm going to set it to 64 for now because that's pretty fast still. We want to go into the particles and I want to have some spray. I'm not going to make foam, and the particles are kind of optional. You can also just do a liquid simulation. And if you have the liquid simulation, it will seem like the bottle is standing in pretty clear and serene waters. While if you use the spray, it seems like it's really bouncing into it. So it kind of depends on what type of vibe you're trying to create with your render. You can do both. So we got this turned on. I'm going to leave all of these settings, well, pretty much on default. I will go into the cache, set this to all, set it to end. And now we need to go into this material right here, select the fluid in the physics properties tab, go over to effector and set it to collision, sampling substeps. I'm going to set it to 2, surface thickness. I'm always putting this upwards just a little bit, and I will also select is planar. So now all we need to do is click on the domain, scroll down, go to the cache. I've set it to 100 frames. This should be enough. And then I will bake it and see what we get. All right, so let's have a look at the first rendition of this. And it's moving towards the wrong side because we had the X towards the positive. It should have gone into the negative. But you can already see that our liquid is bouncing into this object. Well, not really, is it? So we should probably play around with some of these settings. We see our spray as well. Before we do that, let's set this to cycles, GPU, and go over to this material. Let's go into render mode. Let's bring this upwards. Let's go to the shader editor, new, let's delete the principal BSDF, and let's add a glass BSDF, and then I will set it to surface, IOR of 1.33 because that's water, and then I will add an HDRI. So let's go over to your HDRI manager. In this case, I'm using Lumio, and I will select, I got one from before, Zwartkops Curve Afternoon, which you can get on HDRI Haven. So I will apply this. And then we get this cool looking water. Now this plane that we made in the beginning, I'm going to give it a new material and it will be black. Very simple stuff. Now let's make sure that we also have a camera for this. So I'm going to place it somewhere over here so we can still see Dior and Sauvage. Place the camera right there. Make sure it's in the middle. And let's set it to 80mm focal length. There's a couple of steps that we need to take right now in order for this render to work out. We've got our, let's see, our empty with all our objects in this. Let's select all of it. Let's press on M, give it a new collection. I'm going to call it Sauvage. And then I will make a light. And I will already light this object because the basis now is correct. If you are already getting a fluid simulation that looks like this, then it's going into the right direction. Now we want to make sure that we are lighting the bottle correctly. I'm not going to make it orange, I'm going to give it more of a bluish tone by increasing the color temperature. Let's make a new one, maybe light it from the other side, something like this. Could work out, maybe it should be further, closer. Now let's make one more, Shift D, and let's place this one somewhere over here. Scale it up a bit, and now this is lit pretty decently. We've got some cool edge highlights, stuff like that. Maybe one of those is too much. So now that we've got our lighting set up, we don't want the light to work in the water because it's going to give us some weird reflections. It might even create fireflies, stuff like that. So I'm going to add light linking, and in order to do that, I will select all the lights in the scene, place them in a new collection, Sauvage Bottle Lights, give it a name, and I will name it Sauvage Bottle Lights right here, target Sauvage. Add light linking, and now it doesn't work on the water anymore, but only on the bottle. And this is exactly what we wanted to have happen. We can notice that there's something going wrong here. And that's because the bottle is stopping this water. But the way to fix it would be to take our black plane and bringing it down. Then we will bring in a new plane, scale it up, give it a glass material. So let's select the water last, go to material, copy material to select it. And now we also get some water right over here. Now if you want the water to look a little bit more interesting, there's two ways to do that. We can either sculpt it, going to be by a subdivision, subdivide it a couple of times, like this, then go into sculpt mode, use the draw brush and give it a bit more of an interesting shape. And in that fashion, we are going to blend it in to the environment. And you can spend some time on this in order to get it right. And this is going to be the final render. However, there are a couple of things we need to change. Before I do that, let's go over here, mesh, let's add a icosphere. Let's add another one, enable proportional editing by pressing on O, and let's shape this to be a different type of spray bubble. Something like this. I'm going to mess around with it, and I will select all three of those, go into a collection, call it droplets. Then I will go into this mesh, go to the particles, and under spray we have 83,500 fluid particles for this frame. I'm going into render, go to collection, enable droplets, and now we have droplets on here. We have to randomize the scale. We can play around with the scale anyways, so 0.02 maybe. And now finally all we have to do is select all of these, auto shade smooth, select the water last, go to the material tab, copy material to select it, and now we have those same glass particles in the water. Now what you can also do is go into this material for the glass. Let's copy this material. Let's remove the glass, make it a principal BSDF right there, and then it will be white. And if you want to make this look a little bit better, you can go into the transmission, bring that up, then also go into the emission and give it a slight emission. And that will also work out and look pretty good. So it kind of depends on what you want to do. I'm not quite settled on it. I probably will use the glass shader instead of the emission one. Now, if you already think this is a pretty cool render and you want to render this out, one thing I would recommend adding right here is a point light. You're probably wondering why a point light. I'm going to make it orange. I'm going to bring it underneath here, somewhere under the water. Then I will increase the strength. And perhaps what you want to do is go over to shading, light linking, and let's add our water plane in here, which is going to be the cube, and then disable it. And now you can have some pretty cool looking lighting effects right here as well. I think this adds a little bit to the render. You may or may not like it. Do whatever you like. So this liquid simulation is not the type of quality that we wanted to have. Go into the physics. Let's go to the domain. Let's free all. I'm going to set the narrow bandwidth to 4. This will increase the amount of particles, basically making it more sticky instead of moving out of each other. So if you have a very thin liquid simulation right now and it doesn't look like it's sticking together, then you can increase that value and it should work out. I'm going to set the resolution to 256. So let's go over to bake all and I will wait for this. So once you have your liquid simulation, one final thing that you could do is add an image right here. So I'm going to add a moon and bring it in the back and make sure that the composition looks nice, such as in this final image. And in this fashion, you will get a pretty cool looking render. So that's everything I wanted to show you. You have probably already seen the final result, so you can achieve something like that too. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, so today we are going to make a liquid simulation and it's not going to be in the type of fashion that you're used to. We are going to use AI in order to get this done. Now, I know a lot of people are not a great fan of AI because it takes away from the creative process, but to be honest, liquid simulations never were a fun part of the creative process in the first place, since we cannot even do something, we simply click on bake, we hope for the best, we wait for hours, and afterwards you get a render, tons of things are wrong with it, and you have to keep doing it over and over again, and before you know it, a whole day has passed and you have not got the result that you want. And usually we just give up and then we're like, alright, this liquid simulation is good enough. And today I'm going to show you a new AI workflow that's going to help with liquid simulations. Now, of course, there are a couple of problems like this infinite water generation after it has splashed on it. So it's not like it's perfect or that you're going to get the render you want exactly. But the difference is this only costs 3 minutes, while the baking for a liquid simulation may take up to hours, especially if you are doing a 256 resolution liquid simulation. So this is a workflow that's going to work out great for everybody, especially if you have a bad computer and a lack of time. So I'm going to be using Kling AI. Kling AI has been taking over the AI video generation world by storm, and people are often comparing it to Google's Veo. Now, I've been playing around with this and I think it is capable of some pretty cool results. So right here we get a liquid simulation that looks pretty cool. Of course, there's some weird artifacting going on around this area and we have this infinite water generation going on here, but I still think this is a very time efficient solution. So Kling AI, usually you start off with the text to video, but I'm going to image the video. We are on video generation, Kling 1.6. 1.6 is free. It's going to prompt you to pay if you use 2.1 and the queues are very long, etc, etc. Kling 1.6 still works out fine. Now, what you do, you create a render, which we've created in a previous tutorial, and then I'm going to this area right here, I will select an image, and this was the image I selected. So it's going to take some time to load in. You don't need to select an end frame. You can do that if you want it to morph into different things and stuff like that. I'm simply going to give it a prompt. I used the prompt water clashing into product, so let's use that again, and I'm going to generate this. And now it's going to tell you how long it will take. Estimated time 2 minutes. All right, so let's have a look. The water's a lot slower now, it's a bit more slow motion. Let's do it again. Let's type in the negative prompt, slow water. Hi Aki Fumujan, I see that you got the ultimate Gobo pack. I hope you're enjoying it. Alright, so now the sea is moving in the product. That looks pretty cool actually. Interesting. So now I'm going to use another prompt. I'm going to say water falling from above on the product, and I will select all of this Go to Deep Seek. The Dior Sauvage cologne stands under a luminous full moon. Cascading water droplets collide dynamically with a dark blue surface. Liquid splashes ripple outwards around the bottle's base. Celestial shadows deepen the mystical luxury. The camera remains stationary. So I'm just going to take that and add it to this prompt. I'm going to turn off DeepSeek R1, which is the newest LLM model, just like ChatGPT basically. And I'm going to press on generate. I've never done a liquid simulation that's this easy before. Still looks pretty cool. No water falling from the top though. I think it's taking the DeepSeek prompt a bit too seriously. Let's just give it one more shot. Even though we are not getting all the results that we would like to have, I still think there are some pretty cool ones like right here. We've generated this one. That looks pretty cool. We've got this one that's too slow. Still, it has its vibe. This one also looks pretty cool, I believe. And we have some water moving about, rippling. So in this short amount of time, I've already made 1, 2, 3, 4 liquid simulations. Let's see, I've got 11 minutes on the clock here. So during the time that I started filming, 11 minutes were what it took to get all of these generations. And now we'll get the next one. So it's 12 minutes for 5. If I were to have done this with baking liquid simulations, probably would have taken more than an entire day, and you have to use a second machine so you can keep working on the first one. It's just not the best workflow, and I think it's totally fine to have AI remove this terrible process. Okay, we have another one. Oh, there you go. Oh, that looks pretty cool. Whoopa. All right, it's even wobbling the product a little bit. I think this looks awesome. And the fact that you can still see through the water, like right here, the Sauvage, it's pretty cool detail. I think this is nice. Yeah, we get a good one here. You cannot download it without a watermark unless you have a full subscription. It costs like 80 bucks, I believe, a year. Cool, let's try some other ones. So I added this one with the stone environment. Water splashing into the headphones. It's pretty cool. It's not really bouncing on the product, but it's giving us this effect right here. I think it's nice. So I took this subway image, subway overflowing with water. That's so cool. Now, as you've seen, doing liquid simulations in this way is a whole lot faster, and I also believe a whole lot more fun. I hate liquid simulations in Blender, I'm just going to be honest here. They are very unintuitive, they take a lot of time, they keep your computer busy and it makes weird noises. I don't trust that. Leave a comment on what you think about these advancements with AI, and I'll see you in the next video. Click here to watch it. So today we are going to be creating this product. We're going to model it, we're going to texture it, we're going to light it, and that will be it. So let's get started straight away. Right here I have an empty scene and there's a cube and a light, and I will press X to delete it. Then I will go to the image reference and bring in the reference image, which you can get for free on Patreon. It's this image, and yes, there's a bunch of other stuff as well because I got it from a website, Aldar. RZ90, RY90, and then I'm going to scale this up until it's approximately the size of the default cube, which I will bring back right now. And the reason why I'm bringing it to the size of the default cube is so that every setting that we will be using is going to be the same for all of us. So this is the approximation that I think will work out fine. Now, I'm going to delete this default cube. Then I will bring in a plane, and I will bring this backwards. Now that we've got this plane, we actually need to make sure that this shape is following the pattern. So on the sides it is flat, but right here on the front there's a slight angle, and we want to replicate that. I'm going to add some loop cuts right here and make sure that they are uneven, because then we have a middle line. I'm going to press on 1, and then I will select O for proportional editing, and right here we can set it to sphere, because we want it to be spherical instead of smooth. So I will select this vertex, G and X, and let's bring it outwards. Make sure that our scale is big enough. Something like this. Shouldn't be too extreme, but it also shouldn't be underwhelming. So I'm going to place a loop cut right here, turn off proportional editing, SX0, and now it is straight. I will select all of this because we don't need it anymore. And then I will go to the modifiers, add a mirror modifier. And now it is too far. So I'm going to bring this G and X, make sure clipping is turned on, and now it won't be able to move past this middle line. This is a bit too wide, so I'm going to press S and X and actually scale this down just a little bit, like so. I think this is correct for the bottle that we are making. Now I'm going to make sure that all of this is exactly in the middle, apply the mirror modifier, and now if we move this around, it should be connected. Press X, dissolve edges, because we don't need it anymore. I'm going to select everything, click on 3 in order to move into this view, And then I will press E and it will move upwards automatically. I'm going to bring it all the way over here. Then I will press E once again, scale it inwards. Then I will add a loop cut right here with Ctrl R and scale it outwards. And now we should have a bottle that looks like this. Now we're going to add some loop cuts right here as well and make sure that we get squares. Squares that look like this. I'm going to select all of this in the middle, press I just a little bit. And I will press E to bring it down. G and C until it's somewhere over here. We can click on 3 and make sure that it's approximately the same over here as well. So it's going over here because we're going to drag it outwards later on. I'm going to scale this inwards. And now we'll click on Ctrl plus. We have this area selected, so I will press Ctrl I to select everything else and hide it. Now it's hidden. I'm going to select this middle edge right here, this one in the middle. I will turn on proportional editing once again, click on 3, G and C, and make sure that it looks like the reference, just a little bit. Something like this. I'm going to press on Alt C, and I'm going to add a loop cut right here, and scale it inwards. It should have a non-uniform type of texture. So something like this as well. I will select the inner area, and scale this down as well. We can add another loop cut right here. Press O to make it go more inside. Select this and have it go inside even more. Press Alt H and now the model looks like this. I'm going to press Ctrl I once again and now we have the inner area selected. I'll click on Ctrl plus because I want a little bit more, but I don't want this area, so I'm going to deselect it by holding Alt. I'm going to press Shift D, P, separate the selection, and now we have a selection for this inner area. I will make sure to select this inner line and search for grid fill. This will fill up the grid and now it looks like this. From here on out we have two options. We can either move along with this or we can simply destroy it by clicking on faces and deleting all of that. Then go over here, type grid fill. Now we have some more grids to work with. What I'm going to do is press I, move it inwards just a little bit, press E to move it upwards, press I to move it inwards, and E to move it upwards. I believe this is correct for this object. I'm going to click on 7 and I will make sure that we have this entire middle area. Click on Loop Tools, Circle, and it's messing it up. So we should go here, apply the scale by pressing Ctrl A. So the first thing we're going to do is press I, Loop Tools, Circle, let's scale it down. And we should probably rotate it as well to make sure it's a bit more straight. Something like this. Press E. And I'm not sure how this part looks. What you could do is delete the inner faces, select this, press I, move it upwards once more. And in this fashion, we will have this type of bottle. On this part, there's going to be a very large bottle cap. So it's not going to be bothering us in any fashion. Now on to the bottom. I'm going to select all of this, holding Control. I will press on 3 to see what we're doing. G and C, let's bring it upwards just a little bit. And I want to emulate this area right here. So I'm going to press E, I'm going to scale it inwards, E, scale it inwards, and E to make it a bit more flat right there at the bottom. Then I'm going to press I and bring it inwards quite a bit, something like this. Press E to move it upwards. And I'm going to do that one more time because I find that it gives a bit more detail in the glass. So E and bring it upwards just a little bit. All right, so now we're going to add a subdivision surface modifier, Ctrl 3. And this is what it looks like right now. We have a slight edge right here. We have our flat edges on the side, and we can always change this by adding more geometry, for example. We are not going to do that right now. We're just going to work with it the way it is. Let's go over here. Let's select this line, and this line, and press Shift E in order to make it a lot stronger. We can also select the top part and press I. Now for the top, what I'm going to do is select this entire object, Shift D, let's bring it upwards, somewhere over there. But now I will make two loop cuts right over there. And I will select the top part like this. Let's make sure we have everything. And I will also select the bottom part. Hold Shift. And now we have this. So let's delete those faces. This inner area is loose, so I'm going to press L inside of it and delete those faces as well. Now, what I want to do is take this part and that part, turn on proportional editing, S and X, and make it a little bit more extreme. Make sure to also get the bottom vertices. Something like this. And that makes it slightly more rounded off. I think this fits better with the model if we look at the lighting right here. So I'm going to click on 3, G and Z. Let's bring it over here and make sure it aligns. Then let's take the entire upper area, like so, G and C, and let's make sure that it's going all the way to the top. Let's select the bottom and add a grid fill. Let's select the top and add a grid fill. Then we'll add 2 loop cuts, S and Z without proportional editing, and make sure that it's a lot stronger. Now, I think this is a bit too much, so I'm going to select both these angles, S and X with proportional editing, and let's bring it back in just a little bit. That's basically it for the model, but we can really tell as soon as we added the lighting and the glass. So let's first add an HDRI. Let's go into render view after setting it to cycles. And now we've got some lighting in here. I'm not going to take a light that has specific colors like blue. So I'm going to take Quattro Quanti, and I find that it makes things pretty white and normally lit. So I will select the bottom part right here, and I will make sure that it's glass. So add a new material, open the shader tab, go to the shader editor. Let's delete the principal BSDF, Shift A, glass BSDF. BSDF into the surface. And actually the settings are perfect because it has an IOR of 1.5, which is the IOR for glass. And that means that our work here is done. We can always play around with the roughness just a little bit. I like giving it a slight bit of roughness, but not too much. Then I'm going to enter into the inside. And what you might think is that we're just simply going to change this color. However, there's a very big problem. Let me make this a slightly lighter color. As you can see, when we look at this through the glass, it is actually pretty dark, while if we bring it outwards, it's way lighter. You can see the difference like so. Now, this of course is a problem. So how are we going to fix that? First of all, I see that we've forgotten to give a modifier to this. So let's press Ctrl 3, and now we can see it is entering to our other mesh. So I'll go into edit mode, press Alt for A and Alt S, and slightly scale it inwards until we actually see some of the glass. We can always make changes by bringing it downwards by ourselves, using Alt-C, for example. And now it is fitting entirely inside of that glass. So how are we going to solve this dreadful situation? Because this definitely isn't the color that's being portrayed right here. Now, the solution is quite simple actually. We're going to open the emission, we're going to increase the strength, and we're going to make sure that it has that same type of color. In order to see things a little bit better, I'm going to add a plane, scale it upwards, remove this for now, and then select the plane, bring it upwards here as well, E and Z, select this, Ctrl B, and shade it smooth. And this is what our bottle now looks like. Already starting to look pretty cool, but there is a slight problem. For this specific area, this glass, we would like to have a solidify. So I'm going to add the solidify modifier. Now, we need to play around with this in order to get it to look right. So if we bring it outwards, it's actually going inwards. But if we bring it towards the negative values, it's going outwards. I like bringing mine a little bit inwards. And as you can see, this gives an extra layer to the glass. So let's make sure that it's really subtle and not too much. So now we have a glass that looks a bit more glassy. It has this double layer. Now, this might also mean that this is now going through the mesh. If that is the case, we can simply scale it down and make some deformations in whatever fashion is necessary. I think in this case, we are fine. Now, for the bottom material, I'm going to the base color and I will give it a hex value of FFE0CCFF. Then we've got this. I'm going to decrease the roughness just a little bit, but we also need a coat. So I'm going to increase the weight and that will make it very shiny, as we can see right over here. So I will improve the roughness by increasing that just a little bit, so the lighting reflections look more like this. Of course, we have to change the color of this as well. I'm going to change the tint with the hex code of FFF2CAFF. And this will make it a bit more creamy. Let me add a light real quick, just a point light, for example. So I find that this is a bit too shiny. I will increase the roughness until I'm happy with the result. Now, we need to add some more. So let's go over to this object right here, Shift S, cursor to selected. This will place it in the middle, add an image, mesh plane, and select the texture. We've got it right here. It says Forever Dior. Going to make sure that we can see the empty once again. And place this at the exact location where it should be placed. And then I will split it in the middle. Select this bottom part, separate the selection, and bring the Dior over there and slightly bigger as well. Something like this. Now, I'm going to select this, give it a subdivision right here as well. Same goes for this one. Let's add some geometry. Go over to the modifier stack, shrink wrap modifier, and select the original glass. This should place it on the glass. I'm going to do the same for this one. Shrink wrap, select the glass. Now, what you might notice is that these textures are not very visible anymore. One way to fix that is actually to open this, then go over to the emission, plug the texture into the emission, and increase the value. And now it becomes a lot wider, which means that we can also read it. And that's just a simple hack to get this fixed. Now, of course, it's not as white as the original image. I'm going to click on 3, by the way, and Ctrl-Alt-0. This will place a camera, which I will set to 80 millimeters. I will zoom this out, make sure it's in the middle. And if you really want the image to be flat, you can set perspective to orthographic and then play around with the orthographic scale. And this will make the image entirely flat. We are not going to do that right now. I'm simply going to use perspective. Now, there's two ways in order to get this really wide background. We can add a new material to our back plane, go to emission and change the strength of this. But this will also emit light and that can be bothersome. It doesn't really matter that much. It still looks pretty good. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going into this material, make it a bit more white, and I will simply add an area light and make it ridiculously strong, such as 10,000, and shine it at the backplane. We can do the same right over here to remove any shadow that it has. Of course, this might be a bit too much, so I'm going to select both of these lights, place them into the plane lighting collection by pressing M. Then go to light linking. We've got our target object right here, which is the plane, and I will select the collection plane lighting. Then I will add the light linking, and as you can see, it doesn't work on this anymore. You can especially see it if we flip it around. So now it's only working on this bottle, and now it's only working on this plane. Of course, the plane is still emitting light on our true glossy reflections. If you don't want that, you can select the plane, then go to the Object Properties tab, open the visibility, and click on Diffuse. And now it will remove any diffuse layers. You can click on Glossy to remove any glossiness. You can click on Transmission, but I wouldn't recommend it. And you can remove the shadow if you would like to do that. This is just something that you can do. Now, if you want to render this out with this white image, but you don't like the fact that there's a strike right here, like a black type of strike, you want it to be completely white, what you can do is go over here and turn the plane off in the camera, make sure that the HDRI is transparent right here. And now you can render it and place it on a white background in Photoshop, DaVinci Resolve, or your editing software of choice. So that's the way that you get a perfect white looking model. Now, I'm going to leave it on for now. I just want to see what it looks like this. We'll go into the camera, view per display passepartout. Click on the composition guides, center, and make sure that it's completely centered. Like so. Now, if you want to make any adjustments, now's the time to do that. And otherwise, we can start lighting this. So let's delete the point light. Let's go to light, area light, RX -90, RZ 180. Let's scale it up a bit. And let's rotate it RC 45 GZC. And now it's aimed at the product with a 45-degree angle. Let's increase the light power on this. And we can also decrease the spread if we'd like to do that. R and Z, let's move it around until we get something that looks pretty cool. Something like this. We can also do it from the other side naturally. I'm going to bring it over there, R and C, and make sure that we get this cool lighting streak on the side. We can also make some sharper edges if we'd like to do that. So select this entire area, for example, and press Shift E. And that will make it a whole lot sharper. We can do the same for this object, for example. something like this. And now we have a finished product. We modeled it, we textured it, we gave it some lighting, and it looks like this. So in the next part, we are going to be making this render. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Subscribe and click right here to watch that video next. So in this video, we are going to be creating this shot right here. So I hope you're as excited as I am, and let's get started straight away. And now that we've got this beautiful render, it's time to make the second one straight away. So I'm going to turn off this plane, and now we have our product in midair. I'm going to select all of this and make sure that we are not selecting any light. So if you turn off the overlays, you can select it like this. You will have everything you need. Let's place this into its own collection. So I'm going to call this Dior Hydra or whatever it's called. And what I will do then is I will duplicate it, bring it slightly towards this side. So what we want to do first is go over here, convert to mesh. So I'm simply going to connect everything together. And now everything is one solid object. And that's great, because we can now easily manipulate this and turn it around. I'm first going to select this, press M, place it in its own collection, new bottle. That's what I'm going to call it. The Dior Hydra can be turned off and we can use it later if we happen to need it. We've got a cool little bottle right here, but we should make a very cool slimy type of effect. I don't know, it looks lotion-like. We're going to make it mesh, plane, let's create it. Let's scale this upwards. Let's bring this down and scale it up some more. Maybe something like this, S and Y. Let's make sure that there's enough space right here. So let's first make a couple of loop cuts like this, oh, maybe 2. Then I will go over here, subdivide and subdivide it 100 times. I want a lot of geometry for this. I'm going to select this entire edge. I will go into the Data Object Properties tab, select the vertex groups and assign this. So now this is assigned, but we also want some shape keys. So I'm going out of edit mode, plus, plus. Now go back into edit mode and we're going all the way to this little vertex right here. I will press on 1, I will select it, Shift S, cursor to selected. Let's select this entire line, set the pivot point to 3D cursor, and I will scale this on the Y-axis as Y 0.7, something like that. So now we have a different key on our shape key instead of the basis. So this key is different, as you can see, something changed, than the original one. And that's great, because now we can turn this up. Let's go over to the timeline. Let's place a keyframe right here, frame 1, and frame 35, we can do the other one. Set the slider to 1, press I once again, and now it will move. But let's go back to the first frame. Let's go to the Physics Properties tab and type cloth. Now here we have a cloth. I'm simply going to set the quality steps to 10. I will go over here to the shape, set the pin group to the vertex group we just created. There should be only one. Let's go to collisions. Let's turn on self collisions. Let's set the quality to 5. Decrease the distance and the distance on this one as well. Then let's scroll down, go to the field weights and turn off gravity all the way to 0. Then I will go over to the cache. I do believe this bake will be enough. I'm going to set it to 150 frames to give it some time, and then I will bake this. So we have got the render right here. Let's click on play and see what it does. All right, it's quite extreme. I think it was a bit too much, this strength right here. So I'm going to turn off the shape keys, because with the shape keys enabled you cannot apply the cloth. I'm going right into the modifier section and apply this cloth, and then we can move it around. Right now we're going to do the materials for this. You need to take whatever time you need in order to get a good simulation. So let's go into the shader editor, let's press new. And in this case I'm going to add a gradient texture. The gradient texture, Ctrl T, and let's see where it's occurring. So let's go into the render view. And I see something going on right there, but it's not very clear. Let's add a color ramp. And it's going from top to bottom. We want to have it come from left to right. So I'm going to select the X and Y in the rotation of the mapping node and set this to 90. Now we have something going from black to white, and that's exactly what we needed. I'm going to plug this into the base color, Principal BSDF into the surface, and now I will change this color to be a bit more creamy. And I will change this color to be a bit more brown, which is actually orange but darkened. Then I will bring it towards this side and look through the camera and see what's going on. Something like this. Let's bring this closer as well. And maybe add another color by clicking on plus and changing this to whatever type of color is in between. Some mocha type color, I believe. And the name of the game is play around with the color ramps until we get to the desired result, which is something like this. Very cool. Let's turn the roughness down because it should be a bit more shiny. And now it looks a whole lot more creamy. Very cool. Now I'm going to scale this up and perhaps lay it somewhere over there. Make sure that we can make an image out of this. So I'll take this one as well. Let's bring it towards this side, slightly lower than that one. Let's do the same for these, something like this. And then let's add the final tree, G and Y, G and X, G and Y. Let's select all of these and slide them over just a little bit. And let's bring all of this down as well. Let's select all of these. Let's place it in its own collection, bottles collection. I've got all of these selected, G and C, until they start to move into this cloth. Let's click on the cloth, go to sculpt mode, select the draw brush, and now we are going to make some adjustments here to make it seem as if they are actually in this environment, and make sure that we are generating some shadows that look natural for this type of environment, as if it's actually laying in this lotion. Awesome. So now all that's left to do is to change the color. So let's select this first one, go into the materials. I do reckon that the one with the emission is the right material, so this one. Let's copy this and let's change the color. This one has a bit of a pinkish tone. Copy this and let's change the color. Something like that. Then do the same for this one. Copy it. Change the color. So now that we have all the bottles with their own respective colors and they are all dipped into this lotion, we can add some lighting in order to make it better. So the first thing I will do is add an area light. Let's increase the power until we can actually see something. Something like this. Now we get all these cool looking shadows in the lotion as well, and this starts to make a lot more sense. So let's scale it up. Let's turn it into a disc in order to get some natural looking reflections instead of those weird looking square ones. And now let's create a new area light right over here on top of this. Let's place it in its own collection, bottles, lighting, max. And then I will go over to light linking, select collection, go to the bottles lighting max. Collection should be bottles collections, add light linking, and now this light should only work on the bottles, but not on the plane, as we can see. Very good. I'm going to make it quite powerful, and let's see what we can achieve. If we bring it upwards, we now get some nice lighting on the sides of these. I like that. Let's duplicate it again, and let's bring it on top of this. Let's make it an ellipse. Let's scale it up. Let's scale it down. Now it's a bit too visible in the glass, I reckon. So let's make it slightly less powerful. Let's rotate it just a little bit and bring it towards the side. And now the final thing that you could do if you would like to do that is change the IOR in the glass material. If you set it to 0.8, for example, it also looks pretty good and we get some different type of results. So you can play around with that. I think 1.5 was fine as well, but definitely give it a shot to see if your render becomes better. So in this video you learned how to use a cloth simulation in order to generate some lotion type for the background. You learned how to use the gradient node in order to get this texture right. And finally we changed some colors and made some lighting effects. And that's basically it. So I hope you learned a lot in this tutorial, and if you did, I highly recommend clicking on subscribe and watching this video next. Thanks for watching this entire free mini course. I hope you enjoyed it, and also feel free to send me your finished work. There's an email address in the description. If you followed this all the way until the end, then I highly appreciate if you click on like and subscribe. That's entirely free and it helps me out. I've also made several solutions for Blender, such as Auto Animate and the King of Light bundle pack, and I would appreciate it if you check that out as well. The links are in the description. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.